CGTN, China Global Television Network.
It's a new chapter for the Democratic Republic of Congo as new President Felix Tshisekedi took the oath of office this week. The inauguration ceremony held at the country's presidential palace marked an end to former President Joseph Kabila's 18-year term. Cheers and jubilation rocked the DRC's capital, Kinshasa, Thursday, as supporters of the incoming president celebrated their victory following a long-awaited and grueling electoral process. But with the country still reeling from contested outcomes of the elections, what can be expected of President Tshisekedi's first term in office? And what more does the future hold after the DRC's historic change of guard? I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. Well, Felix Tshisekedi has this week been sworn in as the Democratic Republic of Congo's new president. His inauguration marked a historic moment for the Central African state, being the first peaceful transition of presidential power since the country's independence from Belgium in 1960. Tuli Shabalala has more from this historic event in Kinshasa. Take a look.
It's a day that will go down in the history books. A peaceful transition of power since independence 59 years ago.
Tshisekedi Tshilombo Félix Antoine, élu président de la République démocratique du Congo. Je jure solennellement devant Dieu et la nation.
The son of the founder of Congo's longest-running opposition party, sworn into office as president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. In his first speech, Felix Tshisekedi called for reconciliation and vowed to promote development in peace and security.
We want to build a strong Congo with its cultural diversity and its attachment to the motherland. A Congo turned toward its development in peace and security. A Congo for all, in which everyone has a place.
It was a jubilant occasion. Hundreds of Congolese came to witness the inauguration ceremony. On the eve of the day, outgoing President Joseph Kabila praised the election process and congratulated his successor.
It is also symbolic of the growing crystallization of the democratic culture in our country, that the lucky elected official, the beneficiary of this historic alternation as the head of state, came from the opposition party. This is the opportunity for me to reiterate, on your behalf and as well as of my own, our congratulations and best wishes for the success of President-elect Félix Antoine Tshisekedi.
Ainsi que nos vœux de plein succès.
It was a fiercely contested December 30th poll. The Constitutional Court ruled that Felix Tshisekedi won the elections by 38.5% of the votes, while his rival Martin Fayulu received just 34.7%. The Southern African Regional Group SADC and the U.S. State Department are among those that have welcomed Tshisekedi's victory. The African Union, which was supposed to send a delegation to the country on Monday, postponed their trip. One of Tshisekedi's first tasks will be to appoint a prime minister. But only time will tell if Kabila will continue to play a leading role in the country. His party is the biggest in the new parliament. But for now, as Tshisekedi and Kabila stand side by side, they signal a new dawn for the Democratic Republic of Congo. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And to help us unpack developments in the Democratic Republic of Congo following the December 2018 elections and President Tshisekedi's inauguration, I'm now joined in studio by Ambassador Boaz Mbaya. He's an international relations expert and the executive director for the Center for Policy Analysis. He has also served as the ambassador to several Kenyan foreign missions, including those in France and Tanzania. In studio as well with us is Matthias Muindi. He's an independent political risk analyst specializing in the Horn of Africa and Great Lakes regions. Gentlemen, welcome both to Talk Africa, and thank you for joining us on the program. Ambassador Mbaya, to you both though, let's start off by setting the scene and looking at exactly where the DRC is today, because it has known little peace since independence from Belgium in 1960, the 1994 to the 2003 war, their conflict known as the African War led to the loss of about 5 million people, and then another estimated 890, according to the United Nations High Commission, says that may have lost their lives during the December election. But now there's a peaceful transition of power from President Kabila to President Tshisekedi. Is it finally a change of guard? Is it finally a change for the DRC?
Well, one hopes so. I think just had a checkered history since independence. Lost 3 leaders: Patrice Lumumba, Mobutu Sese Seko, Laurent Kabila himself, the father of the immediate president. And we hope that the peaceful transition, whether it was flawed or not, would probably lead to a better solution to the problems of the DRC. It is a country mired in conflict. It has also claimed the former Secretary General of the United Nations in the early 60s. So we hope that it is a turning of the page for the politics of DRC.
Matthias, is it a turning of the page? Is it a new beginning for the DRC?
In a way, it's a new beginning for the DRC, because when you look at President Kabila has been in power for 18 years. He was an accidental president. He never sought to be in office, and he ended up ruling the country for the next 18 years. But despite moves by Kabila the last few years to extend his stay in office, he finally realized it is not possible and it's time for him to move out. And there's this now situation, we have a peaceful handover of power. So I think it's a new beginning for the DRC, despite what I can describe as being a turbulent history for the country the last 50 years.
So how exactly is it a new beginning? Because the other contender, Martin Fayulu, though, there are allegations that perhaps former President Kabila may have made a backroom deal with President Tshisekedi. I mean, exactly what happened? How is this a new beginning then?
There are those reports and there's that speculation that even before the election that Tshisekedi and Kabila had kind of formed a kind of a political arrangement. What we have never seen is any substantive evidence of that political deal. And when we look at politics in Africa, it's very rare you can have a high-profile deal like that and somebody doesn't leak the information. Having said that, there are doubts or maybe there are questions about the circumstances in which Tshisekedi was elected the president of DRC. But the most important thing is this: we have had a peaceful transfer of power in the DRC, and it's from there now we have to start now gauging Tshisekedi. Are you a beneficiary of a flawed system? Are you going to be a puppet of Kabila? Right. Or are you going to also still continue being under the shadow of your own father? Because until last year, Tshisekedi has always been under the shadow of his dad. Right.
Now, Ambassador Mbaya, to you though, answering on those supposed allegations and wondering exactly what is President Tshisekedi's style of leadership. Will he be living, under the shadow of former President Kabila? Is this a continuation of the old regime?
There are 3 things President Tshisekedi needs to do. One is to address the concerns of the people of Congo raised by the Catholic Church, which is a very strong institution in that country, and I think to, for a long time, determine the trend of events and the political direction of the country. So he needs to address those concerns, which were also echoed by Mr. Martin Fayulu, the loser of the election. Number 2, he needs to address the economic interests of external powers, which have bedeviled the country since independence. That's what led to the UN involvement. That's what led to the death of Dag Hammarskjöld, former UN Secretary General. That's what led to the death of Lumumba. And I think it created a situation where Mobutu was seen as a puppet of the West. He needs to address those concerns. And then he needs to address the economic situation of the country itself. It is poor, it has no infrastructure worth talking about, and he cannot even probably drive from Kinshasa to Goma, for instance. So there are very big problems that he needs to address to be able to come out as a good leader.
Right. Matthias, for President Tshisekedi, though, to be able to address some of those issues that Ambassador Boaz is talking about, there needs to be probably a complete break from the past and a complete new beginning. But looking at the parliamentary results, though, of course, at this point, President Kabila's, former President Kabila's parties got about 337 out of the 500 seats. So it is still going to be very much a majority in parliament. What kind of mandate will President Tshisekedi have here?
Tshisekedi has a very, what I can say, he's going to do a lot of balancing acts in the next 1 year or so. When you look at, he was elected with almost 30% of, maybe 38% of the vote, but he doesn't control parliament. Parliament is controlled by allies of Kabila. At the same time, people who are not allied to him and not allied to Kabila are also in that parliament. So one of the things he has to do is this: how do I set up a working government with an opposition, with a parliament which is not controlled by my people? The other thing is that he also has to balance out what are the international interests in this country. Because when you look at the international reaction towards the moment he was declared the winner, it was basically very hostile. So he has to address those concerns, but at the same time he has also to balance, like for example, the European Union imposed sanctions on some of the people around Kabila. How do you go about working with people in the European Union and at the same time working with people with Kabila who have been sanctioned by the European Union? So for him, this year is going to be very important to get that balancing act correct.
Right. That whole question of international concerns and external powers, explain that a little bit for us then, to find out exactly how much these external powers have a hand in meddling in the, in the situations of the DRC.
First of all, I think the DRC has always been, let's say, a victim of its own riches. It's one of the richest countries in the world. It's not just in Africa. You can find any mineral across the DRC. So that is something which can always be, a driver for an interest, for people who are interested to come in and mining that wealth without having to do anything with the government. And it has always been something which has influenced instability in DRC in the last, let's say, 25 years, since the fall of Mobutu, basically. But even Mobutu himself was accused of using that wealth, mineral wealth, to benefit possibly himself or maybe his allies and also people in some Western countries.
Right.
So he has to look at this country's wealth and say, how can this wealth be used to, first of all, develop this country and meet the expectations of the people who live in this country, plus also benefit the international community? Because when you look at those minerals, they are very important in the global economy. When you look at something like cobalt, which is used in the modern telecom systems,
right,
most of it comes from the DRC. How can you, let's say, leverage that and develop the country and at the same time ensure that the global economic system keeps on functioning? So for him, it is a very, very, crucial time for him to come into office because he has to, deliver on so many expectations, domestic and external.
And we're going to look at those expectations in just a moment. But Ambassador Boaz, I do need to find out from you exactly, do you see the DRC being able to get rid of the shackles of the international community that have been holding it back, particularly Belgium?
There are a number of problems President Tshisekedi needs to deal with. One is the attitude of the African Union and SADC, where he's going to do most of his diplomacy to begin with. They raised doubts about the election, and they raised doubts about the winner of those elections. Is he going to endear himself to the African leaders? Thankfully, a number of leaders have already congratulated him, including President Ramaphosa and President Uhuru Kenyatta and others, I think President of Tanzania. So that's a good beginning to begin with. But whether that ensures that he's going to have an easy sailing trip around Africa, I don't know. There is a lot of hurdles set against him. Number two, there are major countries, United States, France, and generally most of the EU countries, which also expressed doubts about the electoral system and whether it was effective or not effective. So he has to mend fences and he has to build bridges. It will be up to him to try and deal with the opposition, not necessarily the members of parliament from Kabila's party, but from Martin Fayulu, because he holds a little bit of sway in terms of public opinion. And I think that is a very critical issue that he has to deal with before people begin to accept him. Right,
Ambassador Mbaya and Matthias Mwindi there. We'll stop there for a moment, but we will continue with this discussion on the DRC in just a moment. We are taking a short break now, but do stay tuned. We'll broaden the discussion on the DRC's change of guard in a moment. We'll be right back.
China Global Television Network. From broadcast centers in Beijing, Washington, and Nairobi. A unique global perspective. 6 channels and a video content service. News when you want it and where you want it. On TV screens, websites, mobile platforms, and social media. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Talk Africa. Now, earlier I spoke to Chris Bawoots in Ghent in Belgium. He's an independent expert on the Congo and the author of the book, Congo's Violent Peace. He talked about his perspectives on the regional and international implications of the just concluded national elections in the DRC. Well, to set the stage for the second part of our discussion, let's listen in to that earlier conversation via Skype.
At this moment, we see an apparent calm in the country. And on the short term, this is good news. What that means on the long term is not very promising, but apparently the region and the other partners of Congo have chosen to favor the short term stability. So that's an important conclusion. I think that President Tshisekedi, in the first place, will have to show to the world and to his neighbors that he is able to keep stability in the country and bring back peace in the East. Because, as you know, the war was over at a certain point maybe, but it remained a low-intensity conflict with many armed groups present in the field until today. Felix Tshisekedi will have to prove that he can change that. Economic, disastrous situation of Congo and the extremely difficult living conditions of the population as the result of a very hard way of colonizing the country since the days of Leopold II, and the neocolonialism which followed the murder, the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And we have had Mobutu, who installed such a bad governance that you had to invent the word kleptocracy for it. And former President Kabila did not manage to change that. So this will be the challenge now. If we want the vast reserves of natural resources of Congo being for the benefit of the Congolese population, then you will have to organize the governance of the country, and you have to build up the state again. So that's the most important challenge for the new president. Build up the state again, and do that in a good governance, which is able to give the benefits of the riches of the country to its population, who deserve and need it.
Chris Bawoots there joining us via Skype earlier on from Belgium. Let's continue our discussion now. Matthias Mwindi is still with us here in studio, and Ambassador Mbaya. Matthias, to you first though, because Chris there talked about 2 issues that President Tshisekedi will have to do. One of them will be that Tshisekedi has to prove he can change Congo. Can he?
That's a very difficult, task for Tshisekedi, because Tshisekedi is somebody who has no national experience in terms of leadership. This is the first time he's taking a very senior position in terms of the politics of Congo. So he is somebody who is going to struggle a lot, and he is somebody who is going to look for a lot of people to support him both in the Congo and externally. So he could have the best intentions, but he's still inexperienced in terms of taking over governorship of one of the most challenging countries in Africa, or if not possibly in the world.
Ambassador Mbaya, your thoughts?
I think his difficulty is the perception people have of him, and what that perception is likely to portend for his leadership. One, the fact that there were doubts raised about his election, and Martin Fayulu argues that Congolese voted for change. He is representing change. And the fact that the perception of Kabila and Tshisekedi coming together would raise doubts as to whether he is a man for change. So he has to fight that image. Now I understand that change is transitory just as much as diplomacy is transitory. It responds to the dynamics of the situation. And if the dynamics then play into favor for President Tshisekedi, it is likely he could bring about change, but it's doubtful for the time being.
But in terms of that doubt that you mentioned, that there was earlier on some doubt regarding his win there, though, but the African Union, even though it had initially asked for the elections to be suspended, though, later on said that the bloc will stand behind President Tshisekedi. So did SADC. Have you seen much flip-flopping before from the African Union on matters like this?
That is normal when a president takes power. Once their legal obstacles internally have been overcome, there is no reason why the rest of the world will not deal with that president, because there's no contestation anymore. Whatever Fayulu does, I think he'll probably do it probably by way of protest. But in terms of governance, Tshisekedi now holds the reins of power. He's the one who's going to deal with those leaders. He is going to sit in the African Union, in SADC conferences and so forth. So that's where he should begin to mend fences and begin to attract favor in terms of international support.
Matthias, where do you see the biggest challenge for President Tshisekedi, and what do you think the future holds now for the DRC? It has been a very powerful transition up to this point. We have not heard, any violence post-election. What does the future hold for the DRC?
First of all, the biggest challenge for Tshisekedi at the moment is he has to reach out that constituency in the country which never voted for him. There's a big percentage of people, almost another 30%, who voted for Martin Fayulu. And that is the constituency which he has to reach out, because if he doesn't reach out, those are the people who could now possibly start organizing protests in this country, or start political movements which will make it very difficult for him to deliver on any agenda he has. So that will be the biggest challenge he has to overcome before he even goes to the external one, because the external one, when you look at positions taken by the African Union or the European Union, most of them, they seem to have kind of originated from the positions taken by, let's say, by the Catholic Church and also people like Martin.
Right.
So when they saw the direction it was going, they say, well, this election doesn't look very right. So if he can sort out issues with, let's say, Martin Fayulu, then I think he stands a good chance of possibly delivering some of the electoral promises. But on the other hand, Fayulu is just a public face. Fayulu was backed by other influential political figures in DRC. Most of them who are not in that country. Jean-Pierre Bemba is one of them. Moise Katumbi is another one. So how do you deal with people who Kabila had basically blocked out of the country, but who are very influential in that country? So if he can also reach out and come out to a political agreement, or maybe kind of national interest consensus with them, they'll be able to put him in a position whereby he can start now working on the agenda of possibly mending fences with the international community, African Union and SADC included.
Ambassador Mbaya, 7 million people voted for Tshisekedi, about 6 million for Martin Fayulu. How is he going to unify the country that has been rocked by violence for so long?
That's the challenge, but I think his best hope, in my opinion, would be to emphasize national unity. And national unity means he has to bring all those different constituencies together to think as Congolese first. And then that will enable him to address the economic issues, political issues, the neighboring international relations with Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, and I think Angola now. So the challenges are huge, and he needs everybody's assistance, really, and cooperation to be able to deal with them. So Yeah.
So we're going to look back again at where we started this program as we wind up now. We're going to look back at where we started. The DRC seems to be turning the corner. Your thoughts on its future and your thoughts on whether they have actually finally laid to rest that ghost of the legacy that was left to them by the Belgians and the French?
I think much as a lot of people have kind of this kind of doubts about Tshisekedi's ability, he's somebody who could take advantage of that and do, things which shock a lot of people. A lot of people are not having, lots of expectations on him, especially questions about his victory, questions about he has always thrived on his dad's legacy. I think we are in a position whereby Tshisekedi could be in a position whereby he tries to reestablish a Congo on a different level, because when you look at the man he's taking over, there was not so much which was expected of Kabila when he took over in 2001. But in the first 5 years of Kabila's reign, he really did pretty well. So we could also see a repeat with that with Tshisekedi. So it's not, we should not concentrate so much about the election results, because that is now has been sorted out. It's a question of now the time has come for him to stand out there and be Felix, not the son of Etienne Tshisekedi. Your thoughts, Ambassador Mbaya?
I think Tshisekedi has an opportunity to shine, but if he doesn't take care of the problems he already discussed on this program, it will be difficult. One, he needs to bring the Congolese together. He also needs to deal with the cross-border problems, Rwanda, Burundi, Angola, and Uganda. He needs to deal with the domestic constituencies and the perception that he's a Kabila man. So he has to come out and say, behave like an independent-minded president. That is what is going to help Congo.
Ambassador Mbaya, we'll leave it there for the moment. Matthias Mwindi, thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us on Talk Africa. That's all we have time for this week, but thank you to my guests for their insights. Ambassador Boaz Mbaya, an international relations expert and executive director for the Center for Policy Analysis, also having served as ambassador to multiple Kenyan foreign missions. Also part of the discussion has been Matthias Mwindi, an independent political risk analyst specializing on the Horn of Africa and Great Lakes regions. Thank you all for your time. And remember to keep the conversation going online through our Twitter handle and Facebook. And you can also catch the episode on the CGTN Africa website and our YouTube playlist. Do tune in again next week for more Talk Africa. For me and the team here in Nairobi, bye-bye and see you later.